Good morning, everyone. Good morning, our viewers. Good morning, Camilla. I see you. Good morning, Blessing. Good morning, Benazir. And good morning, Dr. Steven. I'm so happy to be here. Happy to be moderating this discussion. And I think this is one of the most important discussions we could have this year because, just as Nelson Mandela said, education is an opportunity to escape poverty. And we know that education in many parts of the world, a country like Nigeria and in most developing countries, is not at its best at the moment. And the coming of COVID-19 pandemic further proved that yes, we have so much to do when it comes to education. And literacy is the very foundation when we talk about quality education. And COVID-19 has not helped in that regard. So when everywhere went on lockdown, most countries went on lockdown, some children were still able to learn. Some children were able to learn through using their tabs, their laptops, connecting to the internet. But there were so many children, millions of children who were not able to get back to school because they had no means. So look at children, for example, that live in rural communities where there are even no electricity. So how would they be able to power their devices if they have such? We have millions of people in Nigeria, for example, who live in less than $3 a day. So when you're in such condition, when you come from such family, you will not be able to afford buying a laptop or buying a tablet or buying a smartphone to get back to education or get back to teachings or classes that may be offered, even those classes we offered for free. So that's the situation we found ourselves. And we know every year, September 8th, UNESCO has defined it as International Literacy Day. And for this year, the theme is Literacy for a Human-Centered Recovery, narrowing the digital divide. There has always been that digital divide. Yeah, the coming of COVID-19 further exposed that or even deepen that divide. So our discussion today will be centered around how do we bridge this divide? How do we ensure that no child is left behind? And as you have seen, my name is Charles Omofoma, and I'll be your moderator for today. So my job will not be to talk too much. My job is just to make sure that you get the best from these panelists. And we have a good lineup of panelists, as you have seen in that video. But first, I'm going to call on Dr. Steven. Dr. Steven is from UNESCO. I'm going to play his profile briefly, and after that, will be joining us to give his opening remarks before we start the discussion proper. Thank you. All right, sir. Good to have you here, Dr. Steven. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Dr. Charles, and good morning, panelists. Good morning, colleagues.
Thank you, sir.
It's
I'm
my
not a
pleasure
doctor yet, but thank you for calling me a doctor, but I'm not a doctor yet.
Thank you so very much. I want to start by appreciating you and your team for putting this together. It's very wonderful, very appreciating. UNESCO, of course, Waldo is at the helm of this. Tomorrow is 8th of September, where the world will be celebrating International Literacy Day. And this coming today is such a wonderful opportunity for us to interact and then share our views on issues relating to literacy with the team Literacy for Human-Centered Recovery. How do we narrow the digital divide? We all know how COVID-19, affected learning generally, globally, even nationally here in Nigeria. But we are past the level of, trying to count the effects. We all know the effects of COVID-19. Schools were shut down. But again, one good thing is this, that COVID-19 opened up new horizon, new thinking. How do we bridge the gap? How do we make people learn? From our available statistics, we know that about 773 people could not have access to learning within this period of the peak of COVID-19, particularly last year. But the situation is improving, even though we still have the Delta variant of it. But the issue is we have a lot of opportunities. COVID-19 has opened up our eyes to see that there are so many things we can do online without having to, be in a class situation. UNESCO during the period, we developed a lot of online learning platforms where we were able to reach our learners. In the project that I manage, Spotlight Initiative, we were able to create a platform using radio to be able to reach our learners in 5 states that the project is focusing. So it is a reality now that we can do a lot, even in emergencies such as COVID-19. And we may not need to continue to wait until emergency. How do we improve learning, virtual learning, online learning, that everybody, even in the rural areas, should be able to benefit? I think that should be our concern, to narrow the digital divide. We know that there are communities where issue of access to internet, electricity is a challenge, but we need to do something because it is something that has come to stay with us. We must narrow the divide. Everybody should be able to access education. Inclusive quality education is what UNESCO is promoting. Mr. Charles, because I have a limited time, that is our intro this morning. Let us think around how do we narrow the divide? What can government do? What can a civil society organization do? You are playing your role. What can individuals do? What can philanthropists do? What policies should we put in place? What structures are we going to put in place to be able to make sure that we achieve inclusive quality education by the year 2030? I think this is where we are. In Nigeria here, we've been working with the National Open University. UNESCO developed MOOCs, massive open online courses where we're assessing. We also developed a program we call School Meet the Learner, where women and girls are assessing learning using computer, using their smartphones, and it's working. The issue is how do we make it inclusive? How do we make sure that nobody is left behind? We have emergency, IDP camps in Nigeria, for instance. How do we make sure that they benefit? How do we even educate some of them who could not use smartphones to be able to use them? I think these are concerns that we should be able to be looking at during this discussion. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And I'm sure as a specialist in this field, so you'll be contributing your quota by giving us these suggestions, what we should do going forward. Thank you so much, sir. So the next on my list will be Camilla. Camilla is based in the Philippines, so she'll also be giving her opening remarks in the next few seconds.
Good day, everyone. Good day, Mr. Charles, fellow panelists and guests. The narrative revolving around literacy, poverty, and the COVID-19 pandemic is clear to most everyone by now. Literacy and education are key to a productive life. Literacy and education are central to breaking the cycle of poverty, as we just heard. However, across the globe, access to quality education has not been easy for the poor, the underprivileged, and the overlooked members of society. In the Philippines, we refer to the marginalized groups as DDUs, deprived, depressed, and underserved. Gaps in education had been there, and efforts to bridge the gaps have not really succeeded to close these in scale or sustainably. In the 21st century, access to computers and the internet has increasingly become a critical aspect of education. Unfortunately, access to technology has not been equally available to everyone, and again, the overlooked populations have been at a disadvantage. The advantages of a technology enhanced education have not been reaching the underprivileged in terms of both gadgets and internet access. And then COVID-19 came, which greatly altered the way we live, including teaching and learning processes in all levels. Given school closures, that were necessitated by the pandemic, technology presented a promising alternative to continue instructional processes. Thus, the ability to use technological tools and the internet became increasingly important. Unfortunately, a shift from face to face online classes has not been easily possible or even not possible at all for a significant number of schools and the students who had minimal or no access at all to computers and the internet. In the Philippines, the consideration of distance learning as alternative to face classes revealed the extent of the digital divide in the country. The World Bank found that the digital divide in the Philippines is large, with nearly 60% of households not having access to the internet and unable to benefit from digitalization. The digital divide comes in different forms: access, use, and quality of use. Digital technologies entail costly infrastructure and equipment, hence, not all can access the resource. Not everyone has been privileged to have technological knowledge and skills. Hence, not all can use available technology efficiently and effectively. Finally, people who may have access to technology and basic digital skills may not have the know how to maximize or make good use of what is available in the internet. In relation to the theme for this webinar, I have 2 points. First, education is instrumental to a better life. Education is key to breaking the cycle of poverty, and access to technology has become critical in the teaching learning process. But the digital divide is real, it is wide, and it is growing at an alarming rate. A human centered recovery from the pandemic cannot ignore the present imbalance in literacy, education, and poverty, and the increasing role of technology in nearly all aspects of life. These wicked issues are heavily interconnected. People who lack access to technology are deprived of important resources that are instrumental to their development and to a more comfortable life. To lift people out of ignorance and poverty, the digital gap has to be narrowed. Secondly, the digital divide must be addressed. Those in a position to do something about the gap must choose to act on the problem. The digital divide will not close by itself. This is non-negotiable. Children's access to the future cannot be cut off or blocked. That's what I have, Mr. Charles.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Camilla. Just as you said, the divide must be closed. So we can't allow the divide to remain or to keep getting wider. So, and I'm sure everyone will be interested in what can I do, even as an individual. Even though I'm not in power, I'm not in government, what can I do as an individual? All right. Before we get into discussion proper, so let's have we'll have Rotimi next. Rotimi is based in Nigeria, doing amazing work with young people across the whole of Africa. Thank you for coming in, Rotimi.
Thank you very much for having me. Let me thank the organizers of this program for bringing this very important topic for discussion today, literacy for human-centered recovery, narrowing the digital divide. Let me also appreciate the very interesting perspectives that previous presenters have made on this topic. It's very important, and I'm sure that everybody now knows also how important it is for us to narrow the digital divide in the framework of the COVID pandemic that has happened and is currently happening in the world over the last 2 years, which in many parts of the world necessitated a close down of schools. We saw close down of schools across the African continent. In Nigeria, schools were shut down for several months. And as a result, only the top 2% of schools who have opportunities for their kids to learn using digital skills were able to continue some form of learning. What we then saw is that different subnational governments began to innovate and look into several approaches to reach students during this pandemic. One of such is the use of television and radio to provide some form of education for children. In some ways, it acted as a stopgap, but it was not enough for the kinds of education and literacy that we wanted to see in our kids. I'm also excited to know that a number of startups and youth-led organizations are pioneering a number of applications, mobile applications, and technology tools in order to bridge this digital divide. One of the ones that I'm very familiar with is ULesson. ULesson is reaching thousands of kids, not only in Nigeria, but across West Africa by providing videos and education on demand on mobile phones in order to reach kids across the country. But we must know that in this, as we continue to invest and look forward, it's important that education policymakers and government officials begin to invest more into innovative solutions that allow young people and children in schools to be able to bridge the digital divide. In Nigeria, at the moment, the entrance examination into tertiary institutions is being done as a computer-based test. However, many of the kids who are writing these tests from public institutions are interfacing with the computers for the first time when they're writing these entrance examination into our institution. And therefore, it poses a challenge for them to navigate the computer and to be able to respond to the questions presented to them. It's important that investment continues to happen around education and that we continue to invest to lower the digital divide and provide opportunities for children across board to continue to learn as we move forward in this new economy. At this point, I would rest my case and look forward to the responding questions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Rotimi. Just as you said, it's amazing that children writing the is it UMA you said now, that was their first time interfacing with the computer. Well, I know there is hope, and I know you guys are doing a lot already in that regard. Last year we started a project we called Give a Teach, where we connect working professionals like you to go and teach children in rural communities, especially around ICT, so that just to expose these children to the computer before it gets too late. All right, next on my list is Benazir. Benazir is from Pakistan, so she'll be coming shortly to give her opening remarks. Thank you.
Hello everyone. So This year, the topic on International Literacy Day is about how we can play our part in digital world. So there should be alternative ways to ensure the continuity of learning. We are learning as literacy is important for all of us. Uh, I think literacy is as important as air for us. So we cannot ignore the importance of literacy in our lives. But now in pandemic and other natural disaster like things, we should enable learning environments. We should switch to other possibilities which we can implement in our societies, in our localities, to continue the process of learning, because we cannot stop learning at any stage of life. So there is there are people who are not able to engage with technology that well, because use of technology is not included in our curriculum. We do not teach our students how to use technology well, how to communicate through technology, how to learn through technology basically, because we are using technology somehow for the entertainment purpose, for somehow for the information purpose, or most of the time for the communication purpose. But we are not using technology properly for the learning purpose. So we need to learn uh, use of proper technology for the learning purpose to ensure our literacy increment. Okay, so here is a bit coincidence or interplay of literacy and digital skills. Along with literacy, we must ensure learning of digital skills as well, at adult level, at young level, at every level, because when there was pandemic, there is actually basically still we are suffering from that pandemic. People who are good at digital skills were switched to digital learning, were switched to digital teaching, were switched to digital enterprise as well. But when it comes to the people who are not aware about how to use applications, they do not have basic uh, knowledge of digital skills, so it was difficult for them to switch, because we are not that much flexible in learning to switch from one to another. Most of the young people are, but for the adult who have mindset of 30 years 40 years on the same teaching centered classroom, physical classrooms, how they will be switching at earliest to these kind of things. So we must ensure availability of digital skills, learning of digital skills at the very young age. So this pandemic is opportunity for every one of us to reimagine the teaching methodologies, to reimagine and re-establish the teaching strategies which we are using for the centuries. This is not just for the pandemic, but they can be implemented after the pandemic as well. Apart from that, internet facility is too important for any digital skill. But at this time, it's a realistic approach. We cannot ask for internet everywhere. In Pakistan, there are rural areas where they have signal issues. So how they will come to uh, have access of internet? So in realistic world, it's very difficult to allow everyone to have same opportunities to get touch with digital skills. So we must ensure that the things we are implementing in our society must be inclusive, because many of us are from different contexts, many of us from different socio-economical backgrounds, many of us are from different learning environment. So we need to here we need to implement inclusive learning behavior all across the globe. Apart from that, as far as Pakistan is concerned, Pakistan's uh, Pakistan's 40% of population is below poverty line. So they are not even thinking of getting education. So how they will get how they will think even of getting internet access or learning digital skills. Uh, Apart from this, there are some gender discrimination issues. 34% of men are literate in our world and 14% of women. So we must include women in our learning and teaching methodologies as well. Thank you. This was from my side till that.
I don't know if it's me. Okay, so I don't know if it's just me, but I stopped hearing you, Benazir. I don't know if it's my network or it's general.
No, I just
Okay.
stopped it.
Oh, okay, okay. All right, thank you so much. Yeah, the network was breaking at some point, so which is still one of the issues with technology. It's hardly perfect. Okay, so we have our last panelist, Blessing. Blessing is from Nigeria. So she'll quickly give her opening remarks, then go deep into the discussion. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Charles, once again for this opportunity and to the amazing panelists that have spoken. I have my notes full already, and it's glad to know that all across the world we're working together to ensure that we have a world that is educated. And, when you talk about literacy, education, I've come to realize that it plays a very important role in every nation. In fact, it is very important that every nation is literate. When you look at developed countries or you look at the countries that are said to be doing successfully, there is one thing that connects them together. There is one thing that they are both doing together. And what is that? Both of them have ensured that their citizens have a basic level of literacy. All of these countries, all of these nations have ensured that education is compulsory. Therefore, every average citizen can read and every average citizen can write. Now, that goes to tell us a lot about literacy education, that until literacy education is taken seriously in nations, innovation, development, and standard of living will always be low. Now, let's talk about my home country where I am, Nigeria. We have a population of about 200 million people. And among these 200 million people, 80 million of these people cannot write and they cannot read. Now, I'm not even talking about the digital literacy yet. When it comes to digital literacy, about 120 million Nigerians cannot leverage digital tools and opportunities. And I'm sure that's one of the major reasons why when the pandemic struck, it was very hard on us. We already have an educational system that is shaky, but when the pandemic came, it just crumbled a lot of things because as I currently speak to you, 39 million research has it that over 39 million children were cut out of learning. Why? And they couldn't continue. Why? Because of technology. They couldn't access learning, they couldn't access education, and those 39 million kids are still out of school right now. Not going to school, just there. And this the government tried, private schools tried to start remote learning, and the government parastatals tried in their own little way, but we still have millions of Nigerians out there who cannot even access the internet. So if you can't access the internet, how does remote learning even works for you? And that has brought a very huge divide in the digital space amongst kids in the rural areas and even kids in the urban areas where their community is quite vulnerable. And of course, when we talk about literacy education, the community, my community, need to understand that it has gone beyond just being able to read and write. Because what the pandemic has taught us, that literacy education is not just about being able to write, but literacy education now also incorporates literacy digital tools. So when we talk about literacy education, we're not just saying be able to read and write, but you should also be able to empower me to be able to use digital tools. Because after the pandemic, there's been a big shift in the digital space. And right now, for anyone to survive, for any society to thrive, you need to ensure that their citizens are well empowered on how to use digital tools. And I'm sure as we continue with the discussion with the panelists, we'll be able to bring up solutions that can help the different societies that we represent. Thank you once again, Mr. Charles.
Yeah, thank you, Blessing. So I guess we can go quickly into the discussion. So I'm sure everyone is here. Okay, Rotimi is not here yet. Okay, welcome, Rotimi. Um, Now we have some set of questions that we just quickly the little time we have want us to quickly dive in. So first is, we've all said, oh, we all know that there are issues. All right, we know all over the world. Even UNESCO, where they were coming up with this team, so that means everybody has identified that there's an issue. So the question is, my first question is, how can we mobilize adequate technical and financial support to promote literacy programs? All right. When we say literacy program, we're looking at even those that integrate digital skills learning. So how can we mobilize? So Blessing, you're the last speaker, so I will just start with you. I'm a fan of your work. I like what you do, because I know that everybody talking about inclusive education, but many people always forget this part that there are special children. All right. So coming from your angle now, how do you think can mobilize both technical and non-technical and financial support to ensure that we promote literacy, especially for special needs children?
Okay, so first there needs to be a level of awareness. People need to know that literacy education is really, really important. Now, I'll give an example. During the pandemic, a lot of schools, where a lot of parents were charging schools at a very low amount. So, for instance, a school that was being charged, that would pay their school fee for about 200,000, 60,000. During the pandemic, parents were charging 10K, 10,000 naira, because they felt that, oh, the online education is not exactly as real as offline education. So first, it needs to be a level of awareness. People need to know that, literacy education is a big deal. And when we talk about literacy education, we're not just talking about your child learning how to read and write physically, because I basically teach kids with dyslexia, and we can say those are kids that have literacy and difficulty. So first, it needs to be a level of awareness, now both by the society, both by our government. And by the time the society is aware of this, it brings us to the point where the parents are open to explore these opportunities. I'm not even talking about the rural areas yet. I'm talking about the urban areas that still feel that digital tools cannot really work in the educational sector. So when we have parents and schools who are aware, we can then also have a government that takes literacy education very importantly. I spoke about nations that ensure that there's free education, that ensure that kids have at least basic skills to read and write. That's because they have a big budget, set out for the educational sector. But over here in Nigeria, where we are, we don't even want to talk about the budget because it is extremely low. So by the time we move from parents being aware, from the government knowing that literacy education is very important, they move to having a budget that can fit the educational system. And when you talk about budget, that's where you can even talk about teacher training, because teachers cannot even be trained if the finances are not available. because teachers need to be trained on how to use these tools. And during the pandemic, I thought it was easy to use Zoom, but I got to realize that a lot of teachers didn't know how to use Zoom, the Zoom application, and we have to train them on how to do that because education had to continue. So you can see that there is a build-up from first being aware to the government understanding that this is important and putting the budget to it, and then ensuring that teachers are trained. And when you talk about training teachers on digital tools, and you then talk about training teachers on how to use digital tools to teach children with dyslexia, is even a totally new ball game altogether. So those 3 points:
True.
awareness, budget, teacher training.
Okay, thank you, Blessing. Camilla, I know you do a lot of teacher training. So because you mentioned teacher training, so I will just come to you from there. So what will be your response to that question? How can we mobilize technical and financial support to promote literacy?
I mentioned earlier, Charles, that the digital divide will not close by itself. No? The situation is very complex, and all forms of support would be helpful. Digital literacy programs are perceived to be vehicles to educational advancement and even increased chances to quality employment. However,
Okay.
as mentioned a while ago also, in an environment where the digital divide is deep and wide, the possibility of quickly closing the gap is remote. Maybe it would be possible to craft digital literacy programs, but I do not think that these can be successfully rolled out quickly. Hence, recognizing the critical importance of digital tools and the internet in today's environment is necessary. This means moving out of the mindset that technology is just an option or a luxury and accepting instead that this has become a crucial necessity today, pretty much like electricity or water or even air, as mentioned earlier. No? However, the present situation is the reality. And the reality in many places is marked by lack of access to technological equipment or the internet. Here is where older technologies can be put to good use. In a recent webinar series organized by the Head Foundation of Singapore, we saw how principals and teachers from schools in remote places or in very disadvantaged circumstances or environments resorted to the use of radio broadcasting, similar to what Dr. Stephen described a while ago, no? And even Facebook Messenger to deliver lessons. Resorting to older technologies such as these provides time to mobilize technical and financial support to advance to newer technologies. Hence for me, Charles, even before looking for technical and financial support to promote digital literacy programs, it would be very helpful to take advantage of what might already be available, the older technologies. In the fight against illiteracy, there is no time to lose. So that's what I think, Charles.
Uh, okay, thank you. Rotimi, so you heard what she said in terms of even before moving on to new technologies, can we take advantage of older technology? Now, you work with a lot of young people, right? Now, do you think work in that space, young people space, are there resources that can be mobilized, like their energy, their intellect, that can be mobilized to promote literacy?
Using the older
Thank you
technologies.
very.
Sorry, Camilla.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
sure, sure.
Rotimi.
Thank you very much, Charles, and thank you, Camilla. I like what you said around digital divide is not going to close by itself. We need necessary investment to ensure that this moves forward. But like I always say, we don't have to wait several years to close the digital divide. For those of us who are Nigerians, we knew that up until 2001, there were only 400,000 connected phone lines in Nigeria, serving a population at that time of about 120 million people. And then we have the deregulation of the telecom sector, which saw the advent of mobile phones in Nigeria. And between 2001, where we had 400,000 connected lines, We moved in 10 years from 2001 to 2011 to over 80 million connected mobile phone lines. So we literally leapfrogged an entire decade of telecommunication development. So unlike many countries that moved to landlines in their homes, fixed telephone lines, Nigerians literally did not experience fixed telephone lines, and we don't have that culture even to today. You know, in several offices, even in corporate offices across the country, nobody uses the fixed telephone lines. Everybody just uses the mobile phone because we literally leapfrog that development in space. And I think when we talk about bridging the digital divide, we need to constantly be looking at the opportunities to leapfrog. We don't necessarily have to go the way the United States has done, United Kingdom has done, where they have computers in schools. We don't even have electricity in the schools, so we should not even be looking at the normal infrastructure of building computers in schools. We don't have electricity. Some of the classrooms don't even have doors, so you can't even protect the computers if you put them there. You know, you can't power the computers. So we need to look into innovative solutions. Mobile phones are now all over in India, in Pakistan, in Nigeria. Almost every household, you will literally find one household with a mobile phone. How can we develop innovative solutions targeting mobile? And that's where young people come into the fore. How can we provide support, funding, the technology know-how for our young people to collaborate with the education sector to develop innovative solutions? This can be done. It will not be enough, but it's a good place to start. We also need to learn to mobilize domestic resources, like we have seen. Like I always say, we should not wait for anyone to come and support development in our own countries. The West is not going to develop our countries for us. We need to develop our countries by ourselves. As we have seen with Afghanistan, when problems come, the West will disappear. The people in the country need to find the wherewithal and to be able to put together a coalition to be able to solve the problems in country. So how do we do domestic resourcing? We have a lot of corporate companies working in Nigeria. We need to tap into them to provide the solutions to support bridging the digital divide, because there's also benefit for them. They are going to be recruiting their human resource from this same pool in a couple of years. So if the pool is solid, if they're well resourced, it's for the benefit of the entire country, and we need to resource it. Second also is we also need to look at government spending, actual expenditure of government. Politicians want to build bricks and mortar. They want to build more classrooms. Is it more classroom that is needed? There are places where more classrooms are needed, but there are places where we need to use technology to provide the solution. However, politicians want to build classrooms so that they can point and tell the villagers, I built this. Whereas if they provide a technology e-library, they can point to an e-library and say, oh, you know, they have 10,000 books on that e-library that nobody can see. I provided that. So they want to be able to show and tell. But we need to put more pressure on our politicians to put enough resources and domestic resources where it will make a bigger impact. If you ask me, between building classrooms and more children getting educated, we need more children getting educated, and that's where investment should go into.
Thank you, Rotimi. Unfortunately, Benazar is out. Maybe our network is down. So I wanted her to speak before Dr. Stephen, but since she's not here, because Dr. Stephen works, so Dr. Stephen will be our gap in terms of the government, because he works with UNESCO, and he also works with I think the mass literacy
National Commission for Mass Literacy, Adult and Non-Formal Education.
Okay, so you actually work with the government, so you're not even the bridge, so you are kind of our government representative here today, because we look at, I know something crossed my mind while you were talking to me, you know, when you mentioned Afghanistan, I was like, when we talk about promoting literacy, we actually forget the implication of even like what's happening in Nigeria, the banditry, terrorism. We forget the effect of that on even literacy. Yes, the pandemic has caused so much damage, but we also forget that aspect also, what insecurity does to literacy, how it impacts literacy negatively. We know of schools that have closed down because some children were kidnapped from that school, so the school have been unable to open. Well, so let's hear from Dr. Stephen in terms of mobilizing resources, because the government has so much power to mobilize resources locally and internationally. Are they doing it well? What can be done to make it better? Dr. Stephen.
Thank you so very much, Charles, and thank you, colleagues. Let me start by saying that, like my other colleague said, it is not going to be easy to quickly narrow the gap. It is going to be a gradual process. Why? Because of the level of poverty across many countries in Africa. Poverty is a factor. My colleague also talked about the level of basic literacy, that is ability to read and write. Many people still cannot read and write. Even when you give them the mobile phone, some don't even know how to operate it. So these are challenges. The issue of energy at the rural area in Nigeria, so many communities are not within the national grid. Many use generator, but that is by the way. Now, coming to the real issue, how do we mobilize adequate technical and financial support, to promote literacy? One, government should have a conscious and deliberate attempt at budgeting for education. Education sector plan that will integrate digitalized learning. Digitalized learning. We were at the villa with His Excellency, the Vice President of Nigeria, and I think it was in 2018, when he mentioned we were actually presenting the ministerial strategic plan for education. And he talked about Nigerians. In fact, he actually made it clear that we should be moving away from physical classrooms to smart classrooms. Now, what does that imply? It means we should redirect our focus. And redirecting our focus requires government to consciously budget for education. If you are going to digitalize learning, where did the resources, how will it be gotten? What percentage of the annual budget is given to education? And even within the education sector, how much is actually budgeted for literacy? The National Commission for Mass Literacy, Adult and Non-Formal Education is in charge of non-formal education. Now, in those states also, we have agencies for mass education. We call them agencies for adult and non-formal education. Some simply call it agency for mass education. Most of the agencies don't even have budget to fund literacy education in their states, in their local government, even in rural communities. So government should, in Nigeria, for the dynamics, state government also have their role to play in terms of creating the enabling environment for people to learn. How much is the state government budget to education in Nigeria? How much has government given, even in the 2021 budget, how much was given to education? And break it down into higher tertiary institutions, monotechnics and polytechnics, into secondary schools, unitary schools, and then you now come down to the non-formal education sector, the literacy component of it. So that is one point, government dimension. The second is the organized private sector has to come on board. Government should try to see how the private sector should take it up to assist, because education is a huge investment. We must all agree to it. It requires a lot of money. Now we are talking about applying technology into learning. Even if you are going to buy a handset, who will provide the money? Even if you are going to establish a smart classes all over the place, who will provide the money? So the private sector, the organized private sector should come on board. Individuals, civil society organizations should partner with their government, should partner with the education sector to be able to take this thinking where we are talking about narrowing the divide. Now, for instance, the service providers, the internet providers, we should be able to see how they can come on board. If you can provide a handset that, with long lifespan battery for the road dwellers, that when they charge it, it will last like 5 days, 1 week before it will run down. What about even the language? If you want to, kind of package learning modules into the smartphones, it requires that literacy demands that we should start with even the local language, the mother tongue, language of the immediate environment. All those are necessary. Now, even the energy we are talking about, and some issues relating to online and offline, how can we handle them even at the rural level? So it is the responsibility of government for us to mobilize adequate funding, civil society organizations, organized private sector, service providers, all hands must be on deck, because education is a huge investment. Now, technically, before I come to collaborating with international donor organizations, can you talk about virtual learning, narrowing this divide without the teacher, like my sister Blessing said? The population of teachers in this country, even in the formal sector, in the non-formal sector, how many of them are even computer literate? Ordinary laptop to make use of it. My colleague there talked about how students could not even manipulate the computer to be able to respond to jump questions. The teachers their capacity should be strengthened. We have to strengthen the capacity of the teachers. Most of the teachers we have here are those operating within, in fact, in the 20th century, but when the 21st century trying to move ahead, they are not computer literate. Even some lecturers in the university some don't even have an email. Some cannot even respond to WhatsApp messages. Most of them know how to just operate the phone, receive call, and then maybe switch off the phone. So we need to build the capacity of teachers in terms of how to make use of available options digitally. Specialized institutions in Nigeria, we have the National Open University of Nigeria. UNESCO worked with them 2-3 years ago. We collaborated. A lot of universities were put even outside Nigeria. There is a center there, but that center can do as much as they can. They cannot reach everywhere. We need to open up rural centers where we can fund them. There is a place UNESCO established during the project we managed, we call it Revitalizing Adult and Youth Literacy in Nigeria. That was 2016 to, we started in 2012 to 2016 and ended finally in 2017. We opened up a center in Cross River State, around Obudu, where we funded the center with tab, and then we uploaded lesson content in them. We handed them over to the government of the state. Today is moribund. These are some of the issues that challenge the issue of digitizing learning. And it's also affecting how fast we can narrow the divide. So we need to strengthen the capacity of teachers. We need to also look into government deliberate action in improving budgetary allocation to education. UNESCO, some time ago in 2015, recommended, it wasn't a composite statement, that government should think about improving budget education up to 20% of the national budget. How much was, I have seen 9%, less than 9% of the national budget to education. All this cannot solve, and the population keeps increasing. We have 13.2% of out-of-school children in Nigeria. You talked about issue of security. They're there. Most learners are in, most young girls and women are in ID camps. No source of information. The issue we're even talking about now, because COVID-19 brought a lot of issues to the fore. Even when you are sensitizing people because of COVID-19, they need to get access to the information in their local language. If they can't read, they can't write. How would they get it even in the ID camp? These are some of the issues.
Thank you so much, Dr. Siri. Thank you. So many revelations. I'm not sure if we have to tackle each revelation, we'll not leave here today, really. Now, I would have loved to ask you the second question as a follow-up, but since Benazir is here, so I think I'll just go to her to respond to the second question. So Benazir, what kind of policies do you think majorly governments are in charge of policies, formulation of policies. So what policies or measures and intervention do you think are needed to put literacy and digital skills at the heart of human-centered recovery from COVID-19 crisis and narrowing the digital divide? So just as we have been saying, in the same regards, so what kind of policies do you think we should have, especially from the government? Benazir, can you hear me? I'm not sure she can hear me. Rotimi, do you want to respond to that?
Can you take the question again, please?
Okay. So I said, what inclusive and good policies, measures, and interventions do you think are needed to put literacy and digital skills at the heart of human-centered recovery from the coronavirus issue? Or basically just to narrow the digital divide? What kind of policy do you think will help in narrowing the digital divide?
Well, I think that in Nigeria, we already have some very good policies and we already have some good programs that provide the necessary opportunity to mobilize the necessary resources. One of such is the Youth Universal Basic Education Program, the UBE Act, that provides some funding from the federal government, which is not even tied directly to the budget. It's tied to the what is called the Consolidated Revenue Fund, which then allocates 2% of the CRF to the Universal Basic Education Fund, which is then available on equal parts to all the 36 states, which we call subnational government in Nigeria. The problem that we are having is that, and it's twofold. One, some states are not accessing the resources because it's saying the law says if you have X amount of money available to you in the UBE for this year, you need to match that with 50% counterpart funding. States are saying we can't match it. We don't have the resources to match the counterpart funding. And that's where we need more advocacy because states are lazy. They don't want to provide the necessary resources to match that counterpart funding. We've done a lot of work in analyzing that and seeing where do we have gaps. So there are resources on the table that states are not utilizing, and that's one aspect of it. The second aspect of it is also to have further conversations with the Universal Basic Education Commission, because as I said earlier, majority of the resources are going into construction of classrooms, providing table and chairs, which is good. But I feel that we need to be a bit more evidence driven to see where else do we have needs, where else do we have classrooms not available, where can we use technology, where can we pilot. If we say the digital divide cannot be closed now, it will take a while, and we're not even providing opportunities to innovate and pilot, then we're not seeing it. So how can we provide resources towards piloting, towards innovating, towards how can we get new things on the table to close the digital divide? And that represents for me an opportunity that's on the table that we can utilize. I must say to you that every time you put a mobile phone into the hands of someone, regardless of whether they've been to school or not, you put a mobile phone. Several years ago, while I was in Lagos, I asked the security man working where I was living because he didn't go to school. And I'm like, so how do you know who to call? How do you know whose number to call? And he says he saves everybody's number with symbols, right? He used symbols to save people's numbers. And use 2 symbols for this person, 3 symbols for this person, triangle for this person. He's able to know who he needs to call at a particular time. People are innovating and finding out to use their mobile phones. If you take a keke in Nigeria, a tricycle, I think in India they call it tuk-tuk, they have their mobile phone. If you go to Kenya, I was in Nairobi a couple of months back. If you jump into any taxi in Nairobi, they want you to pay them via their mobile phones. They use M-Pesa to receive payment. So we need to find opportunities where we can harness and integrate these tools and also find the funding for it. And one pathway is universal basic education that we're not using. My final point is, interestingly, in Nigeria, the gentleman from UNESCO mentioned, I must say to you that Sokoto State has done a lot of work, investing over 20% of their budget on education consistently for the last 6 years. I think they've done on an average 24%. Kaduna State has done the same thing. And that's the kind of thing that we need to encourage. I won't always say the federal government has no business in basic education. Basic education lies primarily with the state government in Nigeria. And so we must put a bit more pressure on our state government to be able to do the necessary things to move the education agenda forward.
Okay, so let me just go to, I don't know if Benazir is stable now, but let me go to Camilla. How is the situation in the Philippines? Is it similar to what Rotimi has shared, or is it different?
Very similar. In fact, I think what we have been sharing have a very common themes, no? You know, for that particular question that you raised, Charles, I have no specific policy to propose, but I would like to say, express some thoughts, no, on what I think should precede policies, which are ideas I think that can usher in good policies. I believe that literacy and digital skills must clearly and intentionally be made part of a human centered recovery plan from COVID 19. People in a position to do so must be more than just aware of the existence of the digital divide that we have been talking about. I think they must be made to understand what it means and what it feels like to be on the other side of the gap. It would be important to exert effort that will make sure that the situation can be heard and will be heard. You know, in his book, Good to Great, I remember Jim Collins suggested the use of red flag mechanisms, he said. No, red flag mechanisms to turn information to information that cannot be ignored in the places where the digital divide exists, in the places we represent actually, the information about the imbalance and the gap must be turned into information that cannot be ignored so that policymakers will be driven, will be pushed to make good policies and come up with good interventions. Raising the red flag may be the first step towards putting literacy and digital skills at the heart of a recovery plan, putting pressure, as Rotimi mentioned a while ago. The people up there, no, may not know the real situation, and it is crucial for them to know. It is crucial for these people to be pressured, I think. Helpful interventions eventually can include subsidies for internet access, for low-income households, or setting up access centers within communities and neighborhoods. But I would also like to stress the interventions for more basic needs of students as prerequisites to efforts to narrow the digital divide. You mentioned something about the work that I do, no? So I'd like to say that, for example, many of the school children in disadvantaged circumstances depended on the meals provided in the schools for their only decent meal for the day. And certainly, I think hunger and malnutrition continue to affect them even as they attend to their lessons from home right now, no? Maybe more so now that they have no access to the in-school meals. So, Charles, I think that this is a very basic need that should be addressed if the children are to benefit from technology-enabled literacy programs. Hence, the policies that will be formulated cannot just concentrate on digital literacy programs, but they must cover all the aspects that are involved in educating the children.
Thank you, Camilla. Benazir, your mic is a bit noisy, so I had to mute it. Maybe you want to check that out. Blessing, in terms of special needs, I don't know. Do you think the government has enough policies? You know, Rotimi said, "Oh, Nigeria has a lot of policies." And personally, I also know that our problem in Nigeria is not necessarily about policy; it's being able to implement the policies that we have. So, in Nigeria, for example, are there good policies for special needs children? All right, in terms of helping to bridge that digital gap, digital divide.
Okay. Yes, we actually have more than enough policies in Nigeria. Policy is not a problem. We have bags full of them, but implementation is where the problem comes in. I was surprised to actually realize that there is actually a policy on learning difficulties, children with dyslexia in Nigeria, but it looks like it was just something that was copied from another nation, pasted into our nation, but they don't look into it, they don't work on it, nothing is done on it. And when you talk about policies, I believe that when it comes to literacy education, the major thing that our country needs to do is, first of all, ensuring that education, basic education, is indeed free. And Mr. Rotimi had mentioned a lot and explained that explicitly when he was talking about the UBE and the different states. That is very important. And why do I say that? During the pandemic, we had different groups of parents that were reaching out to via the internet, because we have to reach out to a lot of other kids with dyslexia in different cities, not just here in the city of Abuja. And we had different categories. The first category of parents who have some level of digital of literacy education and can use digital tools and leverage on digital tools. It was easier for them to jump on board, and we started online classes with their kids. And then we had others in different towns and states that, although they could not leverage on the tools, they had basic education of reading and writing, and that enabled them and gave them the opportunity to learn how to use these various tools. Of course, some could not use very complicated tools, but a tool as simple as WhatsApp was very helpful and is still very helpful for some of those families that were not in the cities but in rural areas. Well, let me not even say rural areas, but vulnerable communities in the urban areas. But then when you have people in the rural areas who no basic education, can't read, can't write, don't have access to any kind of phone with them, I mean, those are families that I wonder, how do we ever reach families like that? How can we ever reach families like that? I believe that's one of the questions we are answering here today. And then when you come back to policies down here in the city and in urban areas, now we have the phones, we have the technology, but a lot of schools will not allow children with special needs use these digital tools. I'll give an example of children with dyslexia. Now, children with dyslexia need what we call accommodation. What does that mean? Of course, when you talk about dyslexia, you're basically talking about kids who have struggle reading, and it doesn't mean they don't learn other subjects. It just means that reading is the major issue, and if nothing is done, it begins to affect other areas of their education. So now the learning disability community always prefers that accommodation is offered to these kids. And how? So instead of having to read my notes, since I can't even read my notes, why can't I come to school with a recorder where I can record my notes and then go back home and listen to them? And instead of having to do my exams by writing, you already know I have a problem. It's called dyslexia. Why can't I just tell you my answers? And that's what UDL is all about. It's all about ensuring that kids are, not just kids, but people generally, are able to give answers and solutions, especially in the educational sector, not just by writing. But right now we have schools, even private schools, I'm not even talking about rural areas yet, who will not open their heart to technology. A student must write their notes. If I have this graph here, which has to do with problems with handwriting, why can't I just type my notes? They said, no, you must write your notes. If I have a problem with dyslexia, why can't I have an app that can just read the questions to me? They said, no, you must read. But how can I read? Because I can't read. So we have a lot of issues that need to be worked on before we even move down to the rural areas, because even here in the urban areas, a lot of schools are not adhering to these policies. And I think government need to ensure that these policies are well implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, Blessing. I think this is the first time we hearing about that policy, and it sounds like a good one. And I hope that
Yeah.
I hope Dr. Stevie will have to take it up and look into it so that schools are actually using it. Benazir, can you hear me now, Benazir? Hello, Benazir. I'm not
Yes,
sure
I
she
have
can
some
hear.
connectivity issue. See, we are.
Okay.
Hi, am
Yeah.
I audible? Okay.
Yes, yes, you are. You are.
Am I audible?
You're
Yes, you
audible.
are. You are.
Okay.
So
Okay, so I have
will
some
you,
connectivity
you want to
issue. See,
continue?
uh, t- uh, here
Go ahead. Go ahead.
in this situation we have connectivity issues. You can imagine how we are studying in this environment. You can imagine. So there is a need of awareness basically. We people are not aware about the importance of digital skills, digitalization, technology skills, how we can enable learning this technology. We are not aware about this use particularly. So that's why we are facing tremendous issues. So first of all, we make policies according to the awareness of common people for the localities, for the communities, for the societies which are not aware about these particular usage of digital learning. Apart from this, there must be low technology solutions, soft skills added in curriculum, which we can use for the other economic resources, for the other enhancement and development of the country. We cannot rely completely on internet. We cannot rely completely on digital skills. There are many people who are not fond of learning digital skills. Because there are personality traits. When we talk about inclusive society, we have to consider those people as well, those who do not like using technology. So when we consider those people who do not like using technology, so we must ensure any other technique for them which should be inclusive. There are face-to-face methods, there are distance learning teaching methods. There must be a diverse solution for all the problems we are raising here and all the issues everyone is facing across the country or across the world. So, for most, involve the youth and local people in all the policy making and decisions to connect stakeholders with the localities is our foremost responsibility. When we try to implement any idea, it takes some time, maybe 4 years, maybe 5 years, and at that time, needs of that particular society are different, which are not communicated to stakeholders properly. So when we say about implementing anything, any idea, any project, we must do need basis analysis first. What are the needs of that uh, community? What they want to learn via technology? Maybe they want to learn teaching methodologies via technology, maybe learning methodologies, maybe something else. So we must work on need basis analysis as well. So we need to revise curriculum as well. Policy making should be done on curriculum, because when we will involve digital skills in curriculum, everyone will be bound to learn those. As we are bound to learn other subjects, we must be bound to learn digital skills, because we may ignore it now, but later on we use it at every stage of life. So we must work on curriculum level to involve these kind of teachings in curriculums, because it is easy to target the young minds, rather than, because young minds are more flexible, they will learn more easily. Targeting adults would be a bit difficult. So we must work on curriculum policies and involve young and local people in making changes. Thank you.
And thank you so much. There's something you mentioned that I never thought about. You said when we talk about inclusiveness, to also consider people who don't like technology. I've never really thought of that. So yeah, is you are right. they have the right to choose what they want to use to learn. So they can say, I don't want to use technology. So such people
Hello,
actually
I'm done from my side for this
should be
question.
considered. Yes, yes. So actually, I think such people should be considered as well. So let me go to Dr. Steven. You know, earlier on you mentioned about what different stakeholders can do in terms of mobilizing resources. Um, but I think the government through policy making can make the environment um, better for people to want to come in to invest or to support the government. So, for example, I know in some developed countries, if not most developed countries, they have tax incentives, for example, when you give. All right. But in Nigeria, I'm not sure that exists. So that's just an example. So, what kind of policies do you think the government should either implement? Maybe they're already existing, which I'm not aware of, or they're not existing at all. What kind of policies do you think the government can put up and implement? And the private sector will be very happy to jump in and contribute to bridging this digital divide or improving literacy. Dr.
Yeah,
Steven.
yeah. Thank you so very much, and tactically for all your informed contributions. Like my earlier colleagues had said, we have a lot of good policies in country. The implementation is the challenge. We have an education trust fund in this country. We have equalization fund. To what extent are they being used? We have the UB 2% derivation fund that the state cannot access because there are conditions attached. The issue is not even that they cannot do it. Is the issue is political will. Are the politicians ready to bring out the matching fund to be able to access the fund? Is it impossible? The issue is, what are we actually prioritizing? Are we actually prioritizing education and be ready to close the digital divide? These are issues. My other colleague raised the issue of curriculum. I was actually going to do that. Now, in Nigeria, we have the policy, the curriculum is there, but to what extent in depth has it captured the issue of digitalizing learning? It's not there. So curriculum review is very important if we must close the divide, so that we integrate the elements that will help us to narrow the gap. That is an area we should be looking into. We have a teacher registration council. It was said that if you don't have certain level of certificate, if you're not computer literate, you will not be employed as a teacher. To what extent have we implemented them? There are certain exams you must pass before you become a teacher. But sometimes people scuttle the process and they're still teaching. In most of our secondary school, there are people who never attended any university education with bias in education. Maybe HND holders, polytechnic ND holders who are teachers in some schools, except for government school where they're a little bit strict. In private schools, they're there. So we need to look into our curriculum. Are there provisions that are consciously and deliberately targeting narrowing the divide? Now, my colleagues been saying that we're not even talking about the rural areas. I think that is even my own concern, because if we must have access, equity, and inclusion, we should be thinking about those that are farthest left behind, the rural poor, the women, the children who cannot access even any form of education. Now, the digital divide, even in cities, we have the gap between the urban and the suburban. We now have the suburban and the rural communities. And even in the rural community, there are also the farthest left behind. For me, those are my concerns. How do we reach them in our policy? Now, it's through curriculum consciously planned, integrating element of building the capacity of rural teachers to be able to deliver virtually or using smartphones or using computer. They are not literate. Anybody can be employed. Now, there is also limitation to most schools are looking for teachers, qualified teachers. But there are teachers are also roaming about, graduates that are unemployed, looking for what to do. So why can't we look into the system and say, okay, let us increase the number of teachers who are actually qualified, who are computer literate, that can help us to narrow the digital divide. So many of them showed their skill during this pandemic, organizing online lessons. And like my colleague mentioned, the U lesson, a lot of things were done. So we need to integrate all these ones. When I talked about partnering with the private sector, government should design a policy that will bring them on board and then explore the possibility of working with them, using their capabilities, using their funding status to be able to support education and then narrow the gap. So the digital app developers, government should bring them into policy, soften their taxes, give them enabling environment to be able to produce a cheap rate, and then subsidize their services for people to access them. These are the elements that government can bring into the policy. And then we review the national curriculum, we review state level curriculum, and integrate all these elements so that when you are employed as a teacher, when you carry the curriculum, which is your guide, you know what you're expected to do. And then you know what the teachers, the learners are also expected to achieve. Now, my sister Blessing was talking about the barriers. There are many schools now, you don't allow the child to go to school with the phone. In fact, in my children's school, they don't allow them to go to school with the phone. And you're talking about narrowing the divide. If we bar them from using phone in school, maybe because of the negative impact of it, so how do we now bring the gap? If you now decide to create a smart class and they are not allowed to use phone, so how do you operate? So the policy should also be able to consider the possibility of allowing children to make use of phone in their schools if it has been incorporated in the curriculum, that students should be able to make use of their phone. The curriculum should be treated towards making sure that teaching learning do no longer depend on physical class contact. I was talking about what we did under the Revitalizing Adult Literacy, talking about what we are doing currently under Spotlight Initiative. During the pandemic, our learners in Ebonyi State alone, we reached over 20,000 women and girls. They didn't come to class, but we reached them. They were assessed. In these 5 states and 6 we are working in, we were able to reach 75,000 women and girls who were assessing learning through their television and their radio. So we can explore this in our curriculum. How many public schools have television in their classes? It's only in private school where you have the crèche. They give them, television. They bring just to keep the children, warm. How many of our public schools have television where they deliver lessons, unless the teacher must write on the board? So we need to incorporate all these, review our policy, for instance. Even the UB Act that we're talking about, why can't government remove that clause? As at 2017 or so, we had a meeting at NATCOM where UB Executive Secretary was there. He said over 60 billion is unassessed with the CBN. So why are we stacking the money when we are still not able to fund education properly? Government can decide to remove the clause and then fund directly. And let me tell you, even the UB Act, it covers basic literacy. Remember, basic literacy covers non-formal education, formal education, nomadic education. So it's a tripartite thing. How much of the 2% fund is MEC assessing? Because non-formal education is under basic education. The National Commission for UB encompasses both nomadic and adult literacy. They're not assessing it. A few months ago, was it not early this year? I was part of the people that were invited to come and look at effective school. UB is looking at pilot testing effective school, where we begin to consider this issue of integrating digital learning into the system in Soununity schools. We have, I think, the document is ready. These are policies. How do we implement them? Where is the funding? If UB can have up to 60 billion or so naira in account and it's not assessed, And we're coming up with policy that cannot be funded. So what are we really talking about? So we should rethink. Government at the federal level should rethink. Politicians should rethink. State level leaders should rethink. Even community leaders. When fund is meant, like there are some donor agencies that will come to communities, they make donation to the community, the chiefs. Before you know it, the money goes into nobody will account for it. I don't want to discuss even the issue of integrity in terms of being, I don't want to mention corruption now, but it's an issue. There are funds meant for improving the education system. Sometimes they're mismanaged, deliberately mismanaged. How many centers are functioning? I'm talking about non-formal education now, literacy. How many centers are functioning? How many facilitators are being paid? There is a policy in the non-formal education sector in Nigeria that every facilitator, we have two categories of facilitator that facilitate literacy education. The permanent facilitator should be earning the prevailing minimum wage in the state. Then the part-time facilitator is expected to earn 10,000 per month. These have been since 2012 and so on and so forth. How many states are paying facilitators 10,000 naira per month? Imagine 10,000 naira per month. I monitored the schools. When I was asked to monitor, I went to some states. I don't want to mention them. A facilitator was not paid the 10,000, but 5,000 naira. The 5,000 was owed in 3 months, could not pay. I went to another local government. They were paying facilitator 5,000 naira. I mean, sorry, 500 naira, sorry. And they were owing the man for 3 months. They couldn't pay. I appreciate my colleague who drew my attention to the fact that there are some states, fine, who have actually increased their budget allocation, like Sokoto, you said. Zamfara also tried. Even Adamawa also tried. Kaduna, we know. But isn't that a little drop in an ocean? In a state of 36 states and FCT, over 200,000 population. So the issue is that there should be conscious plan to integrate issues, policies, ideas, innovations that will improve the education sector. We include it in the curriculum. I also have, through my project, worked with the Nigeria Educational Research and Development Council. We have just reviewed basic education curriculum to include issues relating to gender, comprehensive sexuality education, and then element of digitizing the learning process. The document will soon be approved by the federal government. Can we implement it? So we should review our curriculum. We should remove clauses, barriers that affect government at this level, local government level, from accessing available funds. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stephen. Before our final closing comment, because after I want us to just go for our final closing comment. But you said something about reviewing the curriculum. I just want to ask, professionals who are not particularly in the education system involved, and were private schools involved also in that process of the reviewing the curriculum?
All stakeholders event. People were drawn from the states. Even international organizations participated in the review process. Private sector participated in the review. Otherwise, it will not be acceptable. You understand?
Yeah.
But what we are saying is, what I'm trying to advocate is a consciously designed curriculum to narrow the divide, where every stage of learning process should put into consideration the issue of ICT, make learning virtual, provide opportunities that can begin to limit the possibility of face-to-face contact, that anywhere you are, you can learn. What can we do? How do we partner with app developers for us to remember that in Nigeria, a greater percentage of our population are rural dwellers? How do we reach them? These are issues we should be discussing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. So these are our final moments, and I would just want us to give, if you can be specific about proposing a solution to, because there's so many problems now. Even made reference to corruption. So there's so much that's just involved somehow. All right. So I just want to give your own solution. If you, let's assume you had the power to solve this issue, to bridge this digital divide as we are recovering from the coronavirus and from the COVID-19 pandemic, what would be your solution as brief as possible? So I'll just start the way you appear on my screen. I'll start with Blessing.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. You know, when we're one of the speakers, I can't remember who, but we're talking about owning it, about we taking it upon ourselves, and that's one way, taking it upon ourselves, like we have with different organizations here in Nigeria. And I believe that's not even a very big problem, because we have a lot of young people who have tech startups and literacy startups that in their way are helping ensure that the dividing line is closed. So what we need now is for the government to help this startup, because the truth is, how many people can they reach? We try our best here at Dyslexia Help Africa to reach a lot of educators in different parts of the nation, but we've not been able to dive deep into the rural areas, because you need so much to be able to go in there and help all of these people. So one of the solutions could be that with these startups that have already started, with all of the tech of startups, the literacy startups that young people in our nation particularly have started, the government should look towards partnering with these organizations. I believe Dr. Stephen had earlier mentioned that, to ensure that we're able to reach more people, not just in the urban areas, but even in the rural areas as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Camilla?
Camilla?
Blessing mentioned partnerships, and I feel myself that the best way to go is to work together with others. I think connected partnerships rather than impersonal or transactional partnerships would be crucial. I use connected partnerships to refer to relationships where the partners have faces to one another. With faces to one another, there will be greater motivation on the part of those who can do something about the situation to act, and to act quickly. Unlike transactional partnerships, where there can be a lot of discussions, but action will not come right away. I also feel that we should be on the lookout for unusual partnerships, or the partnerships that are not typical. When the pandemic made it impossible for face-to-face classes to go on, we were surprised with the many partnerships that were forged to help the children continue studying. In the webinar I mentioned at the start, the principal and the teachers of a school in a remote place in Thailand sought the assistance of the Air Force through the base near the school, and the partnership was very fruitful. So I don't think we should limit ourselves to the usual partnerships, maybe government agencies or companies into digital technologies. I think, no, when the future is at stake, no, people will come together and help. So we can be on the lookout for the partnerships that are interested to move the entire community, no, move the entire country to the future.
Thank you. Benazar?
Yes. First, I mentioned in my every session that being responsible is far most important than doing anything. Is It is our responsibility. If we are communicating here, we are here, and many of us watching us are were able to get a good education. So it's our responsibility to broaden the concept of education to the deprived one. What we can do under our capacity is the best and firmest solution of every problem we are facing today. Are we organizing online sessions for the skills we know? Are we doing the things we know? Are we helping others, those who are not doing it? Are we volunteering our time for the community development in this pandemic? Are we 24 by 7 busy in like earning money? or our personal goals, achieving our personal goals. How we are contributing to community is important, and how we are fulfilling our civic and social responsibilities. How so apart from this, we must engage volunteers. Youth, young volunteers are more energetic, so we can involve those with government, with other stakeholders, with other companies, maybe small ventures, maybe small social enterprise ventures, to get into the solutions they feel which are suitable for their context, because we cannot generalize any solution for all the communities. Everyone sitting at their home, in their country, in their society, in their community knows the problems exactly and how it can be solved. So we must work on the volunteer engagement programs, building the concept of self-responsibility, and awareing people about the basic literacy, basic digital skills, what we can do for now. And for longer term, we uh, collaborate our youngsters with all the stakeholders to have a sustainable effect on our overall goal. Thank you.
Thank you. Rotimi.
Thank you very much. I agree with all what colleagues have said earlier. And I think that it was Dr. Stephen that mentioned the big elephant in the room, corruption. We cannot not talk about corruption. I think that we lose almost a third of the value of the resources we invest in education through corruption. And it's very painful to watch. Plug the leakages. And I think that civil society is playing a very key role in ensuring that government lives up to their responsibilities in supporting education at different levels. I recall when I was in college, in my hostel, there was only one gentleman who had a computer system. It was a desktop in a hostel of about more than 40 students. And within 1 year, more than 12 people learned computer from him using that one desktop computer. So we don't have to create a perfect solution. Every opportunity that we have to provide digital tools and make digital tools available for children, they will make the very good use of it. It might not be perfect, but it's an opportunity to inspire people and let them be able to learn and be able to create a future that they've always dreamt about. Thank you.
Thank you, Rotimi. Dr. Stephen.
Yeah, thank you so very much, thanks, colleagues. Like I said earlier, it's a gradual process, but government should not shy away from their responsibility. It's a service. They should increase budgetary allocation to education, both national and subnational level. Without education, we won't have manpower. Issue of access, issue of quality, issue of inclusion will not be achieved by 2030. And that is what UNESCO is all about. Now, conscious education sector plan to integrate digital technology is necessary. We can't shy away from it if we must narrow the divide. Then teacher capacity building should be considered, to be strengthened, bring them up to the 21st century demand of global teachers. This is partnership providers. We should give them enabling environment to be able to provide their services, at a cheaper rate for them to be able to make it available to the society to use. This is very important. And then concerning the rural people, government should begin to think of making available energy. Technology cannot thrive in a situation or in a society where there is no power. It can't work. How many poor people will afford solar to be able to access? How many can afford generator? So these are very key. And finally, we should encourage innovation. Our youth, some of them are coming up with innovative practices. Government will just interview you. At the end of the day, the thing goes into oblivion. They should encourage innovation. Innovative practices that our youth have come up with. They should sponsor them, encourage them to do more. This is very important. And then, above all, advocacy and sensitization. Our colleague just mentioned that there are people who would want to have the choice of not learning through technology. Fine, it is their human right. They have the right to choose how they want to learn. That if we must join the global community, we are living in a knowledge economy where everything is digitalized. So for anybody to say you wouldn't want to learn, through the available technology, a lot of sensitization is required for those people to be able to embrace the emerging issues, emerging learning processes. And then our politicians, they should wake up. Not only projects that will give them opportunity to be in front of the camera, and then they will show you them for them to just have self ego. No, they should be honest in their policies to be able to reduce the level of illiteracy in our country by consciously budgeting for education and implementing it. And let also the big elephant fear the Almighty God. When they give you money to implement any project, use the money for the purpose for which it was meant, and God will bless you. Thank you, colleague.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Stephen. What a fine way to close it. Truly, if everyone fears God, put that in quote, fears God and have good morals, I'm sure corruption would have died, not only in Nigeria but all over the world. But unfortunately, that's not the case. So it's been another time discussing with everyone. So we'll share the link to this recording after now, and also try and get some snippets out of what we have discussed today and share online tomorrow. Because tomorrow is International Literacy Day, so we hope that we'll be able to share some of these things we have all suggested tomorrow online for people to see. And depending, if possible, we may do a communique from this discussion and share with some relevant stakeholders, especially government stakeholders, just to see what one or two things they could pick from this discussion. So thank you so much, Blessing. Thank you, Camilla. Thank you, Benazir. Thank you, Rotimi. And thank you, Dr. Stephen. And I hope that when we call again in the future, your doors will be open for us to have even reach our discussion beyond this. Thank you, and have
before you go, there is going to be a press briefing today involving UNESCO and the Federal Ministry of Education, National Commission for Mass Literacy, to commemorate the 2021 International Literacy Day. You can avail yourself to the platform where you listen to the message of the DG, who will soon also be in Nigeria, for some certain level of official engagement. So I invite you to link up if the platform is shared. You hear UNESCO, you hear the Federal Ministry of Education, you also hear the National Commission for Mass Literacy, Adult National Education, on what plans they have to narrow the divide. Thank you so very much.
Okay, thank you, sir. So if I have the link, I will share with everyone also to join in.
Yeah, you.
All right.
So,
okay. Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.